Welcome back to another edition of Tom Talks. Richard O'Flynn. Today I'm very, very fortunate to have one of Tom Executive's partners with us, Fergal Gleeson. Welcome, Ferg.
Thanks, Richard.
Ferg, for those in the audience that don't know you particularly well, and I'm sure you've got a hell of a lot of followers out there, but for the benefit of those who don't know you, would you care to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I've worked with Tom Executive for the past 10 years, recruiting senior finance people into the Sydney market. I worked in accountancy recruitment for 7 years prior to that in Dublin, where I was a partner in the firm there. So I certainly spent a lot of time in this world. Apart from that, I'm a father of two. Love life in the northern beaches, and love writing about wine, which you may see in some of my LinkedIn posts as well.
Yes, we've certainly noticed the wine. It's a terrific addition. A lot of added value for that as well, actually, Ferg, come the end of the week. So thanks very much. So across your wider space within finance, within financial services, so we're broadly speaking the CFO's world, can you give us an idea of where the demand has been from a skill set point of view in the last 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I suppose the first way to look at it is from a sector perspective, and wealth management and retail banking have been by far the busiest sectors, anything really with a consumer flavour. Institutional banking has been much more subdued, and when you look at the bank's results, the institutional divisions continue to underperform, so I don't particularly see that changing. Insurance has been an interesting enigma, I would say. Insurers have had their problems, but because there is a lot of structural change happening, that has created opportunities. So for example, QBE and Suncorp are transforming their businesses, and they are bringing in skill sets. Life insurance businesses, well, if you look at banks, they're increasingly divesting them, and again, that has actually created opportunities for people with specialist skills. So that's a sector view. I think if you look at more what type of jobs are in demand, there is definitely a strong trend moving from traditional financial control to commercial partnering type roles. So the flow of work is much more skewed towards that commercial type of accountant now. The other trend I'd call out is a kind of a salary trend. So the busiest people in our business are the recruiters who recruit finance people up to the sort of 140, 150k package level. The top 20% of candidates, those really high quality candidates, they get multiple job offers. So that they are, from a client's perspective, if they're in your business, they're the guys that you've got to look after, because that's where the demand is. If you're trying to hire those people, you've got to respond quickly, you've got to have a strong proposition, because those people are in demand. The senior end of the market, where Grant and I do a lot of our work, the market is slower, but it is interesting. Exceptional people still seem to get fixed up quite quickly.
Thanks, Ferg. I actually sat down with Jeremy Taylor last week, and we discussed all things analytics and business intelligence. I'm interested that you mention, certainly on retail banking and wealth, where there's obviously a huge data set and it's very much consumer focused. But in addition, then the more business partnering type of roles, how close is that morphing into more that analytics skill set as opposed to your traditional management reporting?
Yeah, it's that's a very good question. I think when I talk to the consultants in Tom who recruit those roles up to 150,000 or so, their unicorn candidate, if you like, the candidate that's most in demand, has got finance skills, some data skills, but then also partnering skills, so really strong at communicating and influencing the business. So if I was recommending to anybody at that stage of their careers, what should they be thinking about? They should be building at least some understanding of data to complement those other skills. I think for senior people, you're not going to be required, if you're at you're 40 plus and you're at a head of or a CFO level, you're not expected to start writing SQL queries at this stage of your career. But I think you do need to understand the opportunities that data presents. Every business is trying to become more customer centric. They're all talking about the customer. You can only actually do things about that if you understand your customer better. So obviously data is at the center of that. So that is a key component to, I think, how heads of finance and CFOs build their skill sets as well.
Okay, terrific. Then we've spoken about the last 12 to 18 months, and given this, let's not call it quite a paradigm shift, but given what you've just commented on, if we forecast a crystal ball the next 12 to 18 months from a skill set demand, where do you think that appetite's going to sit?
I would say regulatory change is definitely going to be a big theme. It already has been, and the regulators are increasingly active across a whole range of areas, everything from capital requirements, which will help maintain company solvency, to more customer-oriented initiatives to make sure the customer is not being affected by any conflicts of interest. So definitely people with regulatory experience, whether it's on the project side or people who are used to reporting in the regulatory space, that's going to continue to be a big theme. I would suggest the partnering theme, the data theme will continue to be spaces to look at. People should look to build skills in those areas. For senior finance people, it's quite interesting. If you look at CBA's recent appointment of their CFO, was not from a finance background. If you look across some of the other big banks, the CFOs of their divisions are not from a finance background, so it's almost like it's a disadvantage to be an accountant now to become a CFO. So I think there is a message in that for senior finance people. It's not enough to just be a finance business partner. You should actually get out there and do a business role for a period, learn some things, and then bring that back into the finance fold.
Okay, terrific. So then when we speak about you're an accountant, you work in finance within financial services, and there is, as you said, there's certainly a question of how do I survive and thrive through my career, as well as managing your career. So, we've got a certain limited time to work, and, where do I get the best bang for buck? What is the most lucrative skill set or expertise that I need to concentrate on? Would you have any insight or comments on that? So there are two sides to that question.
I suppose, how do you survive? So, finance people who process will have a limited lifespan. I think finance, the application of robotics within finance is still at a relatively early stage, but I've no doubt in 5 years' time it will be making a very big impact. Just as a lot of shared service work went offshore, so it is that management reporting and things slightly further up the food chain humans will basically be taken over by robots in this space. So you've got to move yourself up the value chain to a position where you're adding some value. I would definitely say if you're a processor, you need to build other skills. You need to add value to what you do. I don't think it's all doom and gloom though for the future. I think fundamentally I'm a pretty optimistic person about how things work. People adapt, and technology often doesn't work out quite the way people expected. And so, for example, one of the opportunities of robotics rather is that roles will come back onshore because people will recognize the value of having the control of having all the things they need done right there in front of them, and often done better. So I think there's actually some opportunities that this presents. I think also, to pick up on the earlier theme, as finance people continue to build their business awareness, build their awareness of the opportunities of data, that will present really good opportunities for finance people, because often data people aren't the best people to partner the business. They need an enormous amount of technical knowledge, but they're often not able to bridge the gap to finance, to business, I should say rather. And finance people are very well placed to be that conduit between the customer, data, and the business. So for that reason, despite all the changes that are happening, I'm very optimistic about the future of finance people in financial services.
Last question then, Ferg. You're a CFO, you run a big team, there's complexity in your world, you've got, you look after either a large business unit or you look after an entire business itself. What skill sets do I need to protect in my team? What is the most at risk from either a future demand, as in a competitive demand that's going to get nicked away from me, or perhaps to keep them challenged and help them, adapt to these changes going forward?
Yeah, I think we mentioned earlier, obviously, your that sort of cohort in the kind of 100 to 150Ks where the market is hottest, so they're definitely the people that you need to look after. People who have got practical data skills along with communication ability, they are the people that you most need to protect. I think overall, finance is changing a lot too in terms of people's expectations of their employer are different. So I think creating a culture that people will want to work in, creating a vision that people will buy into, and developing people's careers, they're the key things a CFO needs to think about in terms of retaining good staff.
Great. Fergal, thanks very, very much for coming on to Tom Talks, where we do our best to find out what's next. It's great. I know you've always had this terrific knowledge, but to be able to share it in this forum has been terrific listening to you. So thanks very, very, very much.
Thank you very much.
That's all for today. So thank you again for tuning in, so to speak, and listening to Tom Talks, where we find out what's next.